رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وما استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار ثم أما بعد. My brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome you, insha'Allah ta'ala, as part of a continuation of the Prophet's Prayer Described series that we've been doing for quite some time. And alhamdulillah, we have done the majority, if not, we have gone through almost every fiqh topic when it pertains to the Salah. So I encourage myself and I encourage all of you, insha'Allah, if you've ever missed any one of these series or these discussions that we've done, then they are available to you that you can purchase them and you can have them and you can learn from them, insha'Allah ta'ala, about just simple ahkam and fiqh issues regarding the salah each and every single day that you pray. Because as you all know, as part of our amana and as part of the trust that we have with Allah Azza wa Jal, we need to always make sure that we constantly keep checking prayer just as much as we constantly keep checking our intention. You know, some of the ulama, they say that they would constantly battle with their intention each and every single day because it kept changing on them. The same theory can be applied to salah. You got to constantly keep working at it to perfect it because it's very easy to get lazy. It's very easy to lose sight of the importance of salah. And honestly speaking, it's very easy for salah to become like a routine. It becomes like cooking or eating. You just kind of do it each and every single day because you know it needs to be done. So it just becomes part of a routine each and every day. If this has ever happened to any one of us, then it's a time when you start to cry to Allah Azza wa Jal because you don't want that to happen to you. And we get this even from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like for example, there's a athar or a statement of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu an. He says that sometimes when he looks at the Kaaba, he would turn his face away and he wouldn't look at it. And some of his friends, the other companions, would come and ask him, why do you do that? Why when you look at the Kaaba, occasionally we would see you turn your face away? And Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu an would respond and says, I don't want my eyes to get used to it. Because again, if you get used to it, then what does the Kaaba become to you? It just becomes like a normal thing that you look at each and every day. So you always want to keep that fire burning in your heart for the love of your deen, the love of the salah. So this is one of the reasons, or one of the primary reasons why we're going to look at the mistakes. The mistakes is important for every one of us to understand because obviously it helps us eliminate them and replace them with things that are correct and things that will purify our salah. Just a little bit about the book. This book that I'm holding in front of you is actually a summarized version of the original book by the author. And insha'Allah ta'ala, moving forward, I will be referring to the original book by the author Mashoor Hasan, hafidhahullah ta'ala. And it's a very thick book. It's a very comprehensive book. As a matter of fact, just before I started the halaqah here today, I just got access to the book and I kind of browsed through it briefly. And it's a book that I really have to spend a lot of time looking at in order to understand the wisdom and the hikmah from the author itself. Because the author is absolutely brilliant, is a thinker. The author is somebody with hikmah and wisdom. And you'll see this in his work, inshallah, as we continue to progress. What's beautiful about the way this topic is going to be structured is that we're going to look at it in categories. So today, insha'Allah ta'ala, the first category when it comes to the mistakes and the errors of salah that we're going to look at are the mistakes relating to what we wear, the clothing that you and we wear, the garments that are permissible for us to wear or not. And this is a crucial topic, especially in our time and especially amongst the youth, which we will come to insha'Allah. So having said that, brothers and sisters, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us His tawfiq and to shower upon us and in our hearts the ikhlas and sincerity, that everything that we hear here today moving forward, it will be something that will benefit each and every single one of us in our salawat. So the first one that we want to look at, so we're talking about the clothing. Now the clothing is important, because the clothing that you wear in salah varies from time to time, and it also varies from culture to culture, society to society. So in other words, what's looked at as something good in this society might be something bad in another society. What's considered to be good, modest clothing for us here is not modest clothing for another country or another society. So clothing, there's an entire chapter that ulama, they speak about in their books called the fiqh of the malabis, or the fiqh of clothing, because even that has its own discussion itself. But when it comes to pertaining to the salah, the clothing that you wear is absolutely crucial. The first error that we want to look at when it comes to the prayer and when it comes to the garments that we choose to wear, the author, hafidhahullah, he says that the person who wears their sleeping clothing for salah, their sleeping clothes for salah, so the pajamas or whatever garment you wear that you use to sleep with, that same garment is used when to pray salah as well. Now there is a hadith narrated in Bukhari عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a man stood up in front of him and asked him about wearing one thobe, one garment for prayer. So this man is asking about the one garment that he'll wear each and every single time, every single day. He's going to wear it to sleep, to eat, to walk outside, to do everything, and also to pray as well. So the Prophet ﷺ asks him, can you not find thawbain? Can you not find two thobes? You see how beautiful the hadith is structured? The Prophet ﷺ doesn't even order him to do it, but he just asks him, can you not find a second piece of garment? What's the wisdom behind that? The companions are probably some of the most poorest individuals, human beings, to ever walk the face of this earth. I mean, we have stories of some companions eating the leaves off trees just to satisfy their appetite. So they're the most poorest individuals that you will find. So the Prophet ﷺ asks him this question. But the point that I want to make here for all of us is that the question has to be asked and it has to be entertained. So here what the ulama, they've said here, and Umar ibn al-Khattab also mentions another statement, إِذَا وَسَّعَ اللَّهُ فَأَوْسَعُوا. If Allah has blessed you with many things, then use those blessings that Allah has given you. Don't shy away from it. So if Allah blessed you with the wealth that you can purchase clothing, and of course you stay away from israf and you stay away from being extravagant. But the point is that you are able to afford these things, فَأَوْسَعُوا. Then you should do that. You should have the blessings that Allah gave you and you should utilize them accordingly. Now, wearing pajamas to pray, the question here is that, is the salah in and of itself valid if you do this? According to the four madhahib, the salah is valid. So there's an ijma', a unanimous consensus that the salah is valid if you do this. But why is it considered an error or a mistake when it comes to the prayer? Imagine if you walk to the mall or you want to go to the store, to the supermarket. Are you going to wear your pajamas to go to the grocery store or go to the mall? Most of the times you wouldn't do that. So imagine if you give the mall or the souk its right, and you beautify yourself to an extent where people are not going to single you out, point at you, or you're not going to stand out. Who has more right for that than anything else? Of course, it's Allah Azza wa Jal. So doesn't He deserve more of a right that you beautify yourself in front of Him? And imagine that these same individuals will make more effort to beautify themselves when they go out to a mall, go out to a store, go out to families' home, and things like this. So here, the point the author would like to emphasize is exactly that. Just think about your priorities. You always, brothers and sisters, want to look good, especially when it comes time to prayer. Because how you dress affects the way and your focus on how you pray. Let me give you an example. Those of you who've tried this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Imagine if you pray a prayer and you're just wearing a simple shirt and a pants. And imagine the next day you pray that same prayer, but you're wearing your white thobe. It's all ironed out. Then you have the shimagh or the scarf, and you have the hat. The mustache is all trimmed, and you're feeling like you're the imam of the haram right at that moment. So what's going to happen? Clothing has an effect on the prayer. That's why it's so important that you understand and you concentrate on what you wear in salah. If a person is sloppy with what they wear in prayer, then their prayer is going to reflect that sloppiness in it as well. But if a person smells good and looks good to the best of their ability for salah, then that's the reflection that they're going to get in their prayer. So you'll find yourself, and I don't know how else to explain how this phenomenon works, but you'll find yourself sometimes that you'll be much straighter, you'll be more focused, and you'll just be more in tune with the prayer. And subhanAllah, this is one of the secrets of the salah that Ibn Qayyim mentions, that this is what dressing and looking good and wearing a proper attire in salah does for the ikhlas of the salah itself. It assists that, it helps it. So the first thing is, you want to make sure that you stay away from the clothing that you would sleep with, or the clothing that you would go to work with, and your clothing you would do all of these other jobs with. Now the author here mentions pajamas in particular simply because of the problems that may happen when a person sleeps. And they may encounter certain things that they may not be aware of when they wake up. So to eliminate all of that, try to change your clothing when it comes to the salah, especially for fajr and things like that. However, side point, if you know that when you wake up in the morning for fajr, and you look at what you're wearing and everything seems to be intact, you know, no problems, nothing, everything's clean, then you can still pray with it. Remember, it's not haram, but there's a dislikeness to it, and it's all because of your akhlaq and manners that you have with Allah Azza wa Jal. I know a lot of people in their families, in their homes, they have like a separate cloth or a separate garment that they would wear, and it basically acts as their prayer garment. So especially for the woman, she'll have like an abaya or something that she would wear only when she's home, and it's hung up after every single salah. The brothers, you should also have this practice as well. Like have a thobe, or you know, what is it called? What's the thing called? I don't even remember. The thing that the shuyukh and the haram they wear, the mish something. I'll remember later, inshallah. But even if you have one of those, it looks good, keeps your focus. And yeah, you might feel like you're the imam of the haram in your house, so it causes you to lengthen your salah and inshallah improve your devotion. So that's the first thing. Second is the author Hafidhahullah mentions transparent clothing. Transparent clothing. Now this is interesting. When we say transparent clothing, we're not just talking about one of the odd materials that somebody would wear where you can see through it. We're talking about regular clothing that you and I, we would see, or you and I might own. Let me give you an example. For the man, you know, often underneath our thobes, we would have those regular pajamas that you wear with the thobe. You can buy them all over in Medina, anywhere you go, even here in the Islamic bookstores. It's basically considered to be the pants that you wear under your thobe. It's like a uniform. That particular pants, you have to be very careful with it. Because if you pray with that pants alone, without a garment over it, there's a possibility you can nullify your salah. Because, I mean, just take a look at the material. And take a look that when you put on that pants, look at yourself in the mirror and see if you cannot see through it. It doesn't become transparent. You can't see the garments that you're wearing underneath that pants. For the woman, it's things like the shalwar and khamis that a lot of the Pakistani and Indian cultures they wear. And I mean, I've seen this with my own eyes. Like subhanAllah, like some khutbahs that I've done in other masajids, like you'll see the sisters walking out and you can see like their arms, you can see their legs, but they're dressed and they have their hijab on. This here, if that's the case, now the ulama, they say that if you can see the skin color, then the salah becomes invalid. But if you can see the malabis dakhiliya, so like you can see the undergarments through that clothing, but not necessarily the skin color, then the salah is generally speaking still intact, but you lose reward for that salah. Again, goes back to perfecting the prayer. See how silly these mistakes are, but how common they happen? They're so silly, they're so simple, you can avoid them so easily with just a little bit of care and attention, but they become so common. So the second one, Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, he mentions here that if a person prays with a t-shirt and that t-shirt exposes the awrah of that individual when they go into ruku' or sujood, then the salah needs to be repeated over again. This here, brothers and sisters, you be very shocked. As a matter of fact, you may not be very shocked, because I'm sure as long as you're praying in the masajid, you would have seen and witnessed this with your own eyes. That you'll see like certain people when they come and they pray, they'll wear certain garments or a t-shirt or something. It's so short and it exposes them when they go into ruku' and sujood. This is a carelessness, wallahi, you have to be ashamed of. You have to be ashamed of something like this, because you're standing amamu Rabbul Alameen. You're standing in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. And here you are. You're not just standing in front of Him, but you're involved in an act of worship, and still you're exposing yourself. So again, the author mentions here, this is one of the other errors when it comes to the salah. For the woman, obviously the emphasis of her covering her body in the prayer is much more than the man. Now, what should a woman wear when she's praying? Many of the scholars, especially the scholars of hadith, they emphasize that the woman should wear something that looks or represents a khimar. It should look like a khimar, or it should represent a khimar of some sort. And this is, of course, based on a couple of narrations where the Prophet ﷺ mentions that every ha'id, every menstruating woman, now the hadith here is not talking about a woman who's menstruating, period. It's talking about all women. It's just a term that's used to describe all women. That every single woman should be covered with a khimar. Now the hadith here is not referring to the actual garment that's titled khimar. What it's referring to is that a garment that acts like a khimar. Do you see the difference? This is really important, because some people, they use this narration and they say that a woman, it is haram for you to wear a skirt and pray salah. Or it's haram for you to have baggy pants. And we talked about this in our discussions in the past, if a woman can wear pants or not. And if she wears a baggy pants, you can't see her shape, you can't see nothing, but what she's wearing is really a pants, but you can't pray with it. It has to be a khimar, has to be an abaya, has to be this and that. So they use that same narration, but that's not what the narration is talking about. It's talking about something that should cover like a khimar. It should represent like a khimar, and the whole body should be sealed like what a khimar would do. In that case here, she is free to use whatever garment that she can that can fulfill that job. What's a khimar? I mean, basically it's that garment from the shoulder down. For some cultures, it's from the head down, and it's a wrap that you put around the body. So she can have this at her access at any time. There are certain materials that she should try to stay away from. The author mentions materials that are predominantly nylon or chiffon. These types of materials are generally very difficult for a woman to cover herself, because on the outside it may look like she's covered, but when she puts that garment on, it may be otherwise. And this all goes back to a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he mentions سيكون في آخر أمتي نساء كاسيات عاريات. There will come a time in my ummah that a woman, she will be dressed and at the same time she will be naked. She will be dressed and at the same time she would still be exposed. I'm not one to tell you, you use your own judgment. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Perhaps we are living in a time like this today. I remember a sheikh told me that he had a student, and this student was a clothing designer. And the student told him that the company that she works for, every single summer, they will sit down and have a meeting. And the subject of that meeting before summer comes is the designing team would like to figure out which part of the body of a woman they can target to expose this summer. And that's the topic of their meeting until the summertime comes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but perhaps we could be living in that time. That's why I get so many questions, like subhanallah, so many questions of sisters around the world that would always look for that loophole that they can justify certain garments that they can wear. I remember when I went to in Dhaka in Bangladesh to conduct a seminar, and I talked about the same concept. I almost got attacked after the lecture, simply because some sisters couldn't understand why certain garments that exposed their ankles and that would expose their entire arm, so this whole arm here was exposed, why they couldn't wear that. Why they couldn't wear that in Salah, why they couldn't wear that just in their daily lifestyle. And it was very difficult to explain these concepts to them. So it's important, brothers and sisters, that we always stick to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his sunnah when it comes to these matters. In addition to that, the third error is wearing pants in the Salah. Wearing pants in the Salah. Now I'm going to give you a general rule and then we'll get into more detail. The general rule when it comes to wearing pants in the Salah is that it counts as a mistake in the prayer. It goes against the perfection of the Salah itself. This is the general rule with it. Now, I don't mean to put anybody who's wearing pants in front of me on the spot right now. This is not pointed to you in any way. As a matter of fact, I wear pants all the time when I'm praying. However, now we need to understand the wisdom behind this particular error. The scholars here, they mention, when you know you have pants that are proper or appropriate pants to wear in Salah, the way you would know is that you test yourself in ruku' and in sujood. And it all goes back to one problem, and that's exposing yourself. Now, you may not even expose your skin, but you may expose the clothing beneath or underneath that pants. That is a problem as well. That becomes a fitna for the people around you. And again, it could possibly lead to the salah becoming invalid as well. So you want to make sure that the pants is baggy enough that it covers well, especially in the ruku' and in the sujood. Again, the author emphasizes that even though the permissibility of wearing pants is there, like Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah, he used to wear pants. He actually used to have these, in one biography that I read about him a long time ago, that Shaykh al-Albani used to go to the library that he had access to in Damascus in Syria, and he used to wear these brown khaki colored pants, and he would cut them, above his ankle, and it would look appropriate. He would look like, the students described that he would still look like the most modest and humble man that they would ever meet. And he was wearing pants. So my point here is it possible to maintain that while still wearing pants? Absolutely. Now, just one point here for the youth that I want to mention too. Some of the youth, they'll look for the easy way out of this. So what they do is, how youth today, a lot of them, they would buy the oversized pants. So the youth, he'd wear like a size 32 waist, but he'll buy a size 42 because that's the style. You got to keep it baggy, you got to keep it loose. So some of the youth, they try to take the back door out of this mas'ala. And they say, well, look, I'm wearing my baggy pants and I'm not going to be exposed. I'm coming to Salah with this. So you'll see the youth now, he's standing, but his waistline is almost down to his knees. And he's like, oh, I got to make sure my isbal is good. I got to make sure I don't cover up the ankles. So he'll take his sock and he'll stuff the pants inside his sock and roll that up. So what does it look like? It looks like, 50 Cent is praying, Salat al-Maghrib with us, right? Like it's going to look like that. Again, it goes back to the same problem. It goes back to the same issue. Never for a moment, especially for the youth, should you think that you can trick Allah Azza wa Jal. وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهِ. They will try to trick Allah and plan against Him, but Allah is already planning against them. Allah already has His own plan. So be very sincere in what you wear in the salah. Don't try to take loopholes. Don't come up to me after this happened to me a few times where, a brother will come up to me, he's all GQ'd out in front of me and he's like, look man, I'm wearing baggy pants, so what's the problem? The problem is not your baggy pants anymore. The problem is the image that you're presenting in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. You have a moral obligation as a Muslim that what you wear should always preserve your Muslim identity. Let me repeat that again. Anything that you wear, you must always look like a Muslim at the end of the day. So whatever pants you choose to wear, whatever shirt you choose to wear, whatever hat you choose to wear, people should still be able to recognize you. There goes a Muslim. Or their Muslim identity is still there with that individual. So that's important. The next error is, now this doesn't necessarily refer to a particular piece of clothing, but it refers to the enthusiasm and focus of an individual when he's praying. Now sometimes you and we might be praying and we might have the appropriate clothing on, but just by accident, something gets exposed. And let me give you an example. I don't like when this happens, but it happens to all of us. You might be praying in the Saf al-Awwal, like the first row, and you're comfortable. But then this other brother, he comes in, or it could even happen to the sisters, he comes in and he shoves his way right in, and he's like, oh, Saf al-Awwal, Saf al-Awwal, and he just shoves his way in. So before you know it, you're praying like this. You're all squished, you're all uncomfortable. This here is a problem in and of itself, which we're going to talk about when we get to the discussion of praying in a line that is cut off with pillars. When we get to that discussion, we will talk about how to form the line as well. But you have this individual that comes there. So fine, you guys are standing and you're praying. But when you go down for ruku' and you go down for sujood and you stand back up, because you guys are so tight with each other, it'll cause your clothing to kind of crimple and pull up, and before you know it, you got a part of your stomach exposed, or your belly button is exposed now, but you don't know. This next error here that's mentioned is the haris. It's the focus that person has to always make sure that after every single rak'ah, take a look at yourself. Don't be shy to do it. Brothers and sisters, I encourage you, every single time you stand up after a rak'ah, make sure that you mentally analyze yourself and fix yourself and get back into the salah. Don't go back into the salah. Stand up for the second rak'ah, but your thobe is all twisted. It's hanging on one end, or there's a back that's exposed. Make sure that you pull down your shirt. You make sure that you look good. And let me give you an example. This example is really important. Now, imagine that, you're wearing a thobe. Now, when you wear this kind of garment, and I see a lot of us here, we wear this, right? For the brothers, when you go down for sujood and then you stand back up, this garment here tends to hang from the back, from the rear. So what is it doing? It's shaping you from the back, but you probably can't feel it. Again, this is what the author wants to emphasize, is that take a moment, a split second to do this. So the imam stands up and he's like, Allahu Akbar. So you stand up, Allahu Akbar. Take your hands and do this. And just drop your thobe. Because that way it's not going to hang from the back like this. And before you know it, the back is all exposed. Your awrah there is exposed to the other person. You don't want to do that. This, wallahi, is one of the most beautiful things I find in our deen. Of how much emphasis in all the slightest detail our deen takes. So you want to make sure that you do that. When you're wearing pants, same idea. If you feel like your pants is, stuck somewhere, fix it. Take a couple seconds to do that and get back into the salah and get focused. Next, the next error that the author mentions is using a particular garment and covering yourself with it, but not actually wearing the garment itself. So what do I mean by this? You ever notice that some people, they'll take like a jacket or a sweater and just throw it on their shoulders? Well, here the author mentions that this could possibly be an error. Why? Number one is that the Prophet ﷺ told the Sahabas and told his companions that whatever garment you wear, wrap it around you. What does that mean? It means that the garment actually has to be worn. It can't just sit on your shoulder and just be there. Why? It goes back to a slight carelessness in the prayer. Because what would happen now if the jacket falls? And especially if somebody's behind you and it falls there, then what's going to happen to him? Now he wants to go down for sujood and there's a big, your jacket or your sweater is right there for him, then you've caused a problem for him. Again, you see the geniusness and the detail of this author, why I mentioned that he was a thinker. So he mentions here, and then of course, there are many narrations like this where the Prophet ﷺ told the companions not to be careless in this particular manner and encouraged them that to put your hands into the garment. So if you have a jacket, you either wear it or put it to the side somewhere or put it in front of you. We're going to talk about that. Some people, when they take their shoes off, where you should put it when you're praying. Then we're also going to talk about wearing the shoes as well when it comes to the salah. In addition to that, we're just going to add this because the author mentions it here, is also yawning. Yawning during the prayer itself. This is also a disliked act, especially when it comes to the salah. But the general rule is yawning is generally makruh in the sharia. Yawning is generally makruh in the sharia. Why? Because yawning encourages laziness. It encourages a person to be lazy and to be tired. You might not actually be tired. You might got your full 8 or 9 or 10 hour rest, but then during the day you're still yawning. And what that does is it start to encourage you to want to sleep more. So it's actually from the sunnah is that you try to fight the yawn as much as you can. You try to repel it and constrain it as much as possible. Now, if a yawn does come in the salah, then the Prophet ﷺ says, وَأَن يُغَطِّ الرَّجُلُ فَاهُ, that the man, he should cover his mouth even in the prayer. He should cover his mouth whilst he's in the prayer itself, again as part of an akhlaq and as part of an etiquette with the salah itself. Another error that is mentioned is rolling up or folding garments when you're praying. So you find that some people, they will fold their pants. So outside, they wouldn't have this isbal issue, having the pants below the ankle. So when they're out on the streets or whatever, now we did a whole discussion about the isbal as well. So we've talked about all the different opinions regarding it. But this person here, he comes into the masjid and he rolls up his pants or he rolls up his sleeves and then he comes to the salah. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma mentions that this is also an authentic narration of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he mentioned never to do this in the prayer. Don't ever fold your garments when it comes to the salah. Hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. And Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah also mentions an ijma' on this. Ittafaq al-ulama, that there is a ijma' amongst the ulama for the person who folds the thawb or folds the sleeve or anything similar to it in the prayer. Now the question here is, why? What's the problem with folding your sleeves and folding your pants? Like, what's the big deal, right? People ask this question. To be honest with you, I have not found an answer to this. I have found some wisdoms that ulama, they've mentioned. One wisdom that I found was that this was a practice of the mushrikun during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and even before Islam, that they used to do this as part of their prayers. So it was something that would resemble the method in how the mushrikun would pray. Another explanation or wisdom that I found was some of the ulama, they mentioned that this is bad etiquette because it shows extravagance in the salah. So you're basically, you have all this extra material on your clothing and, you're folding it up. It presents a bad image as though, I can afford it and I can also put it away at the same time. Use this qiyas. One of the customs that, in some Arab societies, not all of them, and a few of them, is that they have the ideology that whenever they entertain a guest, you always have to buy extra food for them. And you buy more than what they can eat so that you can show them that this is what you can afford. And it's like very few Arabs. I used to meet some of these cultures when I was in Medina. Very, very small cultures, very, very small groups. But I remember one time one of them took me out for dinner. And it was just me and him alone. And we ordered enough food that could probably feed like half the jama'ah in this room. So I asked him, I was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you ordering all this food? And he's like, mashi. He's just like, well, whatever. And then, and then I asked him, I said, you got to tell me, like, why are we doing this? Haram. And he's like, look, man, you're my guest. So I just want you to know that, we're going to take care of you. We're going to look after you. Don't worry about anything. We got this. And I said, subhanallah. So it's the same idea here when it comes to the clothing. Again, aside from those two, I don't know of any other solid wisdom behind this. Wallahu Azza wa Jal knows best. We'll just mention two more and then we will pause, inshallah, for the salah. The next one that is mentioned is exposing the shoulders. This is the next error when it comes to the salah. Again, the Prophet ﷺ mentions that none of you, لا يصلين أحدكم في ثوب واحد. Nobody should pray with just one garment. ليس على عاتقه منه شيء. Nobody should use a garment that doesn't cover the shoulders. So that your shoulders is considered part of your awrah in the salah itself. So the shoulders should have something to cover them. Again, this goes against now those who wear like the tank top or the jerseys or the vest and you can pray with them. This here, now the author does mention here that this hadith is not a prohibition, but rather it is a dislikeness to this. In other words, when the Prophet ﷺ is saying that none of you should pray unless you have a garment that reaches your shoulders, in other words, it's disliked for you to expose those shoulders. So the salah technically is still valid, but again goes against the perfection of the salah. And remember, whenever we say something goes against the perfection of the salah, in other words, you're losing reward in the prayer. That's the most important thing. You're going to lose reward in your salah. So you want to make sure that the shoulders are also covered as well. This is extremely important because summertime is here anyways. And another error is praying with pictures on your garment. The Prophet ﷺ, once he stood up for prayer, قام رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي في خميصة ذات أعلام. So he was praying and on his garment there was an a'lam. An a'lam is literally like a symbol or a sign or just a mark. So it's not necessarily a picture itself. So when the Prophet ﷺ finished, فَلَمَّا قَضَى صَلَاتُ, when he finished his prayer, he took the garment and he gave it to one of the companions and he says, take this garment to Abi Jahm ibn Hudhayfa radiyallahu anh. So take it to this individual and tell him that I don't ever want to use it again in my salah. And then he mentions that the reason is, for verily it distracts me in my prayer. Verily it distracts me in my prayer. And then the Prophet ﷺ continues, and he requested a kasa'un ghalidhun la alama fi. He basically requested a garment or a cover that was thick and that there were no symbols or anything on it. So in other words, what's happening here? He wanted a plain garment to wear. Anas radiallahu anhu also mentions that the Aisha radiallahu anha, she used to have a particular curtain that would separate her home from her neighbor's house. And that curtain had an image on it. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told her to remove it Verily, it distracts me whilst I am praying. And one of the most interesting thing is that even Bukhari, rahimahullah, in his Sahih, he actually has a chapter that's titled the chapter for the one who prays with a garment that has pictures in it. Hal tafsudu salatuhu? Is it going to nullify their prayer or not? And according to the majority of the ulama, the salah is still intact, but again, it is incomplete or imperfect in terms of its reward. Praying with pictures is very, very disrespectful, not only to the people around you, but of course in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. How does a servant feel when he's standing in front of Allah and he's got like, the angry bird right on his t-shirt right there? Or he's got like, a dolphin or something, or some kind of famous celebrity right there, and he's standing in front of Allah. And he's asking, oh Allah, ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. Oh Allah, put me upon the sirat al-mustaqim, the same sirat al-mustaqim that you gave to the people who came before me. But here I am with my Angry Bird t-shirt in front of you. It doesn't make any sense. It contradicts the whole focus of the salah itself. So of course, we want to make sure that we abstain from that. So finally, I just want to conclude, inshallah, by wrapping up this discussion of the pictures on the shirt. Once Imam Malik rahimahullah, he was asked about a ring that had a symbol on it. It just had a symbol. And the man who had the ring on, he said to Imam Malik, can I wear this and can I pray with it? And Imam Malik rahimahullah said to him, La yalbis wa la yusalla bihi. Don't wear it and don't pray with it either. Now Imam Malik, one thing you have to understand about how Imam Malik derives his fatwa is you understand his circumstance and how Imam Malik built his madhab. And inshallah, maybe perhaps one of these days in the future, we can discuss a discussion of the chronicles of the Sharia or the history of the Sharia itself. And we can go through how each of the madhab developed and why each madhab is so different from the other, but at the same time they complement one another. But the point is, at the end of the day, it all goes back to one clear concept, which is the concept of distracting others around you. However, insha'Allah ta'ala, the salah is still intact. In our next discussion, we will talk about what you should wear on the head and certain colors that are permitted or not permitted to be worn in the salah. We'll also talk about the wisdom or the errors regarding people who pray with shoes on. When is this allowed or when is it not allowed? And inshallah, that will take us into other discussions and errors when it pertains to the salah. So having said that, brothers and sisters, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to perfect our prayers. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our salawat, to accept our du'at. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us, shower His rahmah upon each and every one of us, and enter us in His Jannah. Allahumma ameen. So having said that, next session, I will test you. What I mean is that I will just ask you certain things that we talked about today. What's an evidence for it, or what's a wisdom behind it? And depending on how you answer, inshallah, you will have a reward. فجزاكم الله خيرا وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.